Welcome to another Waltons cast interview. Today we're lucky enough to speak to Kami Cotler, who's in the waiting room right now here. She's over in California. Let's say hi. Kami, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
You know, it's been
so many Waltons to talk to.
Yes, it's been so much fun. I've been chatting all week to the guys, and one more to do tomorrow, and we're all done tomorrow. I'm speaking to John Walmsley tomorrow, who's here in the UK. Do you hear much from John, or now that he's in the UK, is he more distant?
I do still hear from John. We actually had a Zoom. He emailed and said, let's just get together and chat online, and so we did that not that long ago. And then I think he's heading out here for the wedding, so we're going to get together again next weekend after. So I mean, I think it's like any extended family. You know, you see each other now and again, and you try to make plans for getting more of you together when you can, and as soon as we're all in the same room, we just revert instantly, and it's like nothing has passed and nothing has changed, and we're all chatting and doing like we always have done. So
it's so difficult to believe that it's been 50 years since the Waltons first aired. I keep getting people telling me to be quiet and shut up when I say that, because it reminds them of what age they are. And I've been taking questions from the fans online as well. And I have to say, the response that you got for questions was just incredible. I think we would be here for the next 3 hours if I was to ask you every question that we got in. So we did get a lot in. But let's kick off way back to the beginning. Tell me about... I mean, you were very, very young when you went into the Waltons, but can you remember life before the Waltons?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember life before the Waltons. Can you remember when you were 4 and 5? Yeah, just in probably the same number of memories that anyone has. You know, I remember preschool, and I remember little moments like you do when you're that little. And then I think it's the same thing when the show started. I have weird little sense memories from very early on, but then there's huge things like I don't really remember auditioning for the show. Like I know about that because the other kids have told me, but I remember kind of arriving on the soundstage to film the homecoming, and then it smelled of spray paint. I remember sitting at a table doing school, like real school, with my castmates, and I think I remember that Eric could draw trees, and they were really good. So just the random stuff that sticks in your head when you're little.
You know, a couple of the actors have been talking about eating at the table because it was real food and it was a real working kitchen, and how they adapted to not actually eating the food. When did you catch on to that? Because I have to say, when I was watching the homecoming, you looked like you were really enjoying that meal.
I did. I loved that soup. And in fact, there's a story around that. I don't, for whatever reason, and I think it was just canned, like Campbell's chunky vegetable soup or something, but I had never had that kind, and I thought it was delicious. And I believe they'd just accidentally given me a spoon that was like 3 times bigger than my head. So that only made the footage more ridiculous. And I was so unself-conscious, like it didn't occur to me that I was, like I wasn't old enough to be thinking like, oh, I'm eating and millions of people will see it. Like I just, oh, soup, good. And what my mom remembers is being on the set the day after we filmed that scene. And in that scene, Patricia Neal, who plays Olivia, who plays Mama, has a beautiful long story to tell about how she met Daddy and how they got married and how her parents didn't approve and the whole story. And I'm sitting right to her right-hand side at the table. And my mom said the next day that the director came up to Patricia Neal and said, she said, oh, how did the scene look, the story? And he said, it looked great, but you'll never believe what happened. And she looked at him and she said, the little one? And he said, yes, you can't believe how she eats soup. So they cut away to me shoveling soup in my mouth way more often than he probably had planned on doing. So yeah, as I got older, I began to realize, like, you learn from experience, right? Typically, when you film a kitchen scene for a series, like, you might end up filming the main take right before lunchtime. And then you go to lunch, and then you eat again, and then you come back. And because we filmed out of sequence, right, we would film everybody at once, and then we'd come back, and the camera would move, and we'd just film, like, a close-up on Olivia or a close-up on Grandma and Elizabeth. Because we filmed like that, 2 pages of a kitchen scene might take 3-4 hours to film. And you just have to match whatever you ate in the very first take that they printed, that they accepted. You have to eat the same way. And I sat next to Ellen, who had been a script supervisor. So she was very conscious of matching, and she would kind of cue me, like, right pigtail forward, left pigtail back. You took a bite after this line and after that line, and then you buttered your bread. Like, she would coach me through matching because she was so good at it. And then eventually you figure out, like, I shouldn't eat too much, because whatever I eat in that first shot, I'm going to have to re-eat that amount of food for the next 4 hours.
Sure. I'm glad you actually mentioned Ellen there, because I was just about to bring that up, because Mary mentioned that about the matching as well, and how Ellen was such a stickler. Now, on this topic of the authenticity of your acting as a young kid, there was a great question came in about you and Ralph. Now let me just quickly find it. Here it is. It's from Rebecca Everest, and Rebecca wants to know, she says, I have been binging the show recently. I'm currently on season 4. There appears to be a genuine affection between Ralph, Michael and Kami. Dare I say parental. Parental-like affection. During one scene of an episode entitled The Statue, John walks past Elizabeth in the living room and lovingly caresses her cheek. It felt almost like an unconscious action, like a parent might do with their own child. I can't imagine it was scripted because it just looked so natural. Am I correct? And did you look on Ralph and Michael as sort of second parents? If so, what must have been it like when you were on hiatus?
That's interesting. A lot of what you see on screen was not scripted. So the dialogue in the bulk of the scene would be scripted, and even then, the adults used to once a week go to readings with the producer and the screenwriter and with Earl Hamner, who is sort of supervising, and they would make suggestions, and they'd say that doesn't ring true to me, and so it was very collaborative before we actually got to the set to try to make that dialogue feel authentic. But there are lots of places where there was space for ad-libbing and for just, speaking off the cuff. Wasn't at all unusual for Will to, like, add a bit to his line, or to, because he was so creative and he had this wealth of knowledge. So he would bring in things to make it more authentic. So yeah, we were all very close. So those relationships were familial. I have a great mom and dad, and they were my parents, right? So and that was always clear to me, even though I was little. But still, we spent so much time together on set that the relationships became like a family. Like, there were sibling rivalries, and there was that affection is real, and it persists to today. Ralph is also, and Michael and Richard, they're phenomenally talented actors, right? So they are also intentionally making choices to make it look more authentic. So it's all kind of happening at the same time, like real feelings and real talent and intent as actors. I think it made us as kids better actors, because they were making these, like, wise choices for authenticity, and we were just following and responding naturally. Michael's got the biggest heart of any human being you're ever going to meet. So she empathizes, and she's warm all the time. And so you could always count on Michael for, if you were upset and wanted to go cry on somebody's shoulder, Michael would be endlessly sympathetic. And yeah, so there were aspects to all those relationships that were familial, but my parents were my parents. Does that sound right?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, they kept it. They wanted to make sure you kept that real, and you didn't lose that, obviously, because you were spending so much time, and you were only a young child at the time, so it would be easy to get confused. And in fact, again, chatting to Michael, we spoke about that saying that you should never work with children or animals. Now, I think where that stems from is probably, how old were you when you first went into the Waltons? 5?
I was 6 when we did the homecoming.
So
I think I was about 7 when we started the series.
So was there never, as a young kid, was there ever any times when you just, nah, I don't want to do it today?
No. And I was very fortunate because my mom had a job she loved. My dad had a business that he was running. We lived, an hour away from Hollywood at least. So this was a crazy hobby that I picked up, that they indulged. And my mom said she said, if you came home and complained, and if you've ever been on a TV set, complaining is one of the things you do, right? Because there's a lot of downtime, there's a lot of waiting. So complaining is kind of part of the culture. But if I came home and complained, she would say, don't go in tomorrow, quit. Because if you quit, then I can just send you back to the local elementary school and I don't have to try to find a babysitter and I don't have to figure out how to get you up there. And I don't have to find a formal gown for a weekend, a gala you have to it just makes my life simpler. So if you're not enjoying it, don't do it.
Sure.
And I was enjoying it. So I just got, oh, okay, never mind.
How did you deal with the fame that came after? Because back in those days, there certainly wasn't as many channels as there is now. So most people were watching the same thing. And the fact is, we were watching it all over the world as well. So the fame must have been crazy. I mean, how did you deal with that?
You make an excellent point. The audiences were bigger. So more people had access to fewer things. But then the flip side is there was no 24-hour news cycle. So the kind of industry of celebrity was smaller. So no one waited outside my house to take pictures of me. No one followed me around. So I could mostly, when I went back to school during the hiatuses, the breaks from filming, there was no press coverage of that. I could just go back to school. So that was much easier than I think kids have it today. And there were some things we shifted, we didn't go to Disneyland as often when the show was very popular, because it was hard, because I'd get people would want autographs and you want to be nice and how long do you stand there? And so there were certain places that I think my parents kind of started to avoid. But the flip side is Walton fans are really nice. They're nice people and their feelings towards you are warm. So my mom would be shopping in a department store and some strange woman would leap out from behind a clothing rack and hug me. So that, I had to learn how to navigate, hugs from strangers. But I was also little and, temperamentally, I like to talk to people. I'm not shy, So it didn't, I think for kids who are more introverted naturally, it's a lot harder on them. But for me, it was a new person to talk to. Here I go.
You guys seem to have a great relationship with the fans over the years and to this day. Just looking at the response you get to some of the events that you guys appear at and the reunions you have, and such a massive following. And I noticed on your Facebook you have a great connection with your fans as well.
I really enjoy it. I grew up to become a teacher. And I think that's always been kind of part of who I am. I like to explain and to share. I like to talk. So for me, the Facebook page has really been a way to answer questions and to share my memories and to kind of reframe the experience, right? Because for the fans, the experience is over 200 hours of television. But for us, the experience is, 8 hours a day, 10 months a year working together. I know someone had asked the question, did the content of the show change or influence your life, right? The fact that you were telling these wholesome stories rooted in family values, did that impact on who you were as a person and the choices you made? And I think the answer is no, because I didn't experience the show the way the fans experienced the show, right? Which is this story from the beginning of the hour to the end of the hour. I experienced it as a script that I read and that we filmed out of sequence over 6 or 7 days. So my experience, the things that changed me were all the people that I worked with. So that means the actors as who they were as real people, not as the characters, or the crew members and their real lives and their real experiences. And the fact that me as this little sheltered girl from, Southern California was suddenly in this environment with people from all over the nation, sometimes all over the world, who I got to work with and who were, the culture on our set was so warm and supportive. I got to ask questions and people would teach me, how to pull focus or how to mix sound or how to use the boom mic. Like everybody was really patient and accepting of the curiosity of a little girl.
Now, I'm going to take a few more questions from the fans. So we have a question from Stacey in Vonore, Vonore, and she wants to know, did your children ever want to be actors?
My children went to a school where they did a play every year. Like that was their elementary school experience. So they did a lot of performance and they were both very comfortable with it. And I always thought did a really nice job. My son wasn't interested. He was also very tall for his age, and that's not really advantageous if you're an actor as a child. You want to be little. And my daughter was interested, but she was also shy. My husband's shy. And so she, on one hand, she wanted to perform, but on the other hand, she would go really quiet when she met new people. And I would just say, you're going to have to, that doesn't work. If you want to be an actor, you're going to have to be completely chatty with complete strangers immediately. I mean, I wasn't really in a hurry to get them into acting. The industry had changed a lot. And I think I had a really unusual experience. I didn't audition very much. I got the Waltons within the first month of auditioning. And that's weird. So my experience was working all the time with a group of people who I knew well. And that's not typical.
Yeah, and you really have to lose all your inhibitions to be an actor. I've heard that, but that's one of the first things you have to do is just drop everything. So thanks to Stacey for that question. Now, John's got a second name that I just won't even attempt to pronounce. It's got about 30 letters in it. Curious to know if Kami had saved any old scripts or other mementos from the show.
I definitely have scripts. My mom saved them and they're in boxes in my garage. Things we don't have. You really didn't take things like props or costumes home. It all belonged to the studio. We were lucky enough to work on Warner Brothers lot, so most of our costumes and props came from their warehouses. And sometimes we were actually wearing stuff that came from the 1930s. It was actual old costuming from Warner
really?
Brothers heydays, yeah.
Wow.
I think I think John Walmsley might have had a jacket on once that said Wallace Beery in it.
Wow.
So crazy stuff like that would happen, where there'd be a piece of furniture or a piece of costume where you'd watch an old movie and go, wait a minute, I wore that dress. So there was a lot of that connection to old classic Hollywood history. But you weren't allowed to take stuff home. It belonged to somebody. And our show, we didn't really know that it was being canceled until the hiatus. So there wasn't that opportunity to be like, does anyone want to take something as a memento? Yeah. But I do have scripts. I have call sheets. That's about it. You're a big Laurel and Hardy person, right?
Yeah, I sure am.
Because I believe that Ellen Corby was a script supervisor on their set.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I mentioned this to a couple of the other actors, and they all said she didn't mention any of that at the time. But maybe she mentioned it to you. So yeah, she was a script writer for Hal Roach, and in my research over the years, I found this out, and I've seen photographs of her from that time, and she actually appears in some of the movies with Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, I think my only regret from my time on television is I was too young to understand who everybody was and to ask questions. I didn't think to go, Ellen, tell me about, being on the set of Laurel and Hardy. And she didn't really volunteer it. I didn't think to ask, Will Geer, tell me about hanging out with Woody Guthrie. What was that like? Tell me about, yeah. So all of those things kind of went whoosh, when Beulah Bondi was on the show, I didn't know to ask. So that if I could do one thing differently, it would be to be old enough to interview everybody.
I think we all feel like that about our own grandparents. we all wish we had asked them questions. Like now, I'm like, I've got a million questions for my granddad, about his days in the war, and that you just don't think to ask when you're a kid. You're too busy being a kid, playing on seesaws.
Yeah.
And here's another question. Hello, Kami. I am Baron Sinclair from the Houston area. You did a great job of maturing your character as you got older during the series. Was the role more challenging in the first seasons when you were so young, or in the later seasons as you got older?
Well, I think it gets harder as you get older because you become self-conscious. I always tell people, like, when I meet people and somebody will mention, oh, she was on television, and so often now I meet people, they're so young, they've never seen the show. And I say, look, if you're going to Google it, Google me before puberty. Like, it's just not cool to go watching images of people go through puberty. It's so uncomfortable and awkward, and that's just not okay. So yeah, I think as you get older, you become self-conscious, and you start to think about, like, where are my hands? What am I going to do with them? And when you're a child, you're totally in the moment. And I do things like when I watch my performances when I was 6 and 7, and I think, what am I thinking or doing? Like, there's one scene where we're all standing in a group, and I think the sheriff's car is pulled up, and I suddenly just start to go like this until I'm hanging completely upside down. I'm just dangling there, and I'm thinking, I'm being filmed, and I don't even that's what I feel like doing right now.
Well, it keeps it real, doesn't it?
Right, and I think it makes it easier for it to be real because you're not so embarrassed and worried. And they also, sometimes their writing would lag behind my character's aging, so I had to actually go to the producers and say, hey, no more jokes about Elizabeth not knowing where babies come from, because she lives on a farm. She has older brothers and sisters. Like, she's not supposed to be stupid. Let's just, it's a cheap laugh, and it doesn't make any sense anymore. And the same thing with being carried or being on people's laps. Sometimes the scripts would say, Elizabeth crawls into John Boy's lap. Richard is not a particularly large person. And they're totally, like, I see scenes sometimes where he picks Elizabeth up and my feet are practically dragging on the ground. So again, I had to go say, hey, stop. It doesn't work anymore. She's too old to be sitting in people's laps and to be carried.
It's actually hurting my face. I'm trying not to laugh out loud because it will make you break up when you're speaking, and my face is sore. your feet were dangling. It's just, I've just pictured that there, your feet dangling while John was trying to hold you. Now, everybody's got these big long names today. Okay, here's a question from Michelle Buckles from Dallas. Kami, are there any scents or smells that bring back memories of when you were on the Waltons? That's a good question, actually.
Really good question. Yeah, definitely. There's a spray paint smell. Sometimes sets smelled like that. I'm trying to think of the lot, because, like, we were outside a lot. And I wish I could say, like, honeysuckle, right? Because there was a lot of honeysuckle on the back lot, and I have really more memories about that flower because, like, Will Gears showed me how to pick them and bite off the bottom and suck the little nectar out. Like, so he used to be a botanist, so he would teach you about every plant that was on set.
Oh.
But honestly, it's things like there's a particular dusty smell they used to take old oak branches and spray paint them green and, like, put them to mask things. So, like, if there was, like, over my, this shoulder, you can see there's bright light behind me. And if we were filming the Waltons, they would have put an old dead painted green tree branch over that. And they had a specific kind of dusty smell that will kind of send me back to the set.
Okay, interesting question there. Thank you to Michelle for that. Here's another good question. This is from Kathleen Conrad from PA. I take it that's Philadelphia?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. So, would you consider reprising your role of Elizabeth if the right script came along?
We enjoy spending time with each other. So if somebody decided they were going to, do a Waltons reunion program and we were available, we would be sure. It's so not up to us. It's really up to whether or not a studio or a channel decides it's worth the investment. And then it's more about the schedules of the stars, right? Is like Richard right now has been touring the United States in A To Kill a Mockingbird. So he's busy. He's a busy working actor. And Michael just finished or was recently seen in Dahmer, the series. So they're busy working. So it kind of also depends on what's the timing for them. But like I say, we like hanging out. So if somebody invites us to hang out together, we'll say yes.
There's also the new Waltons, which is on at the moment. So now we haven't actually had the chance to discuss that yet. But have you managed to catch any of it yet?
I did. They were very sweet and invited us to the premiere of their remake of The Homecoming, and we got to go and meet our corresponding cast, actors, which was fun. Really, really nice group of people. The funny thing is that the young man Logan, who they cast to play John Boy, is actually really good friends with Richard's real son.
Oh,
so there's all these funny connections. We talk about when the show was shown. We talked about it a lot on my Facebook page because there were a lot of strong feelings. And what I always tell people is remember that Walton fans often say, "I wish they would make shows that I could watch with my children and my grandchildren and not have to worry about." So I always say you want to support them when they do that because that's what you want them to do. And making a show about the Depression 50 years later than we made a show about the Depression is that much harder, right? Because we had Warner Brothers sets and costumes, and so it was so much easier to get an authentic look. Secondly, when we made our show, we were at that moment in history where so many experts from the golden days of Hollywood were available. So our cinematographer, Russ Meddy, had worked with Orson Welles. He'd worked with Douglas Sirk. There were people helping direct and craft our show who had learned from the very, very best at the kind of peak of Hollywood. And there was more time and money available to do it. Like you say, a show like The Waltons could pull, a third of viewing audiences in a given night. And the industry's not like that anymore, right? Because there's so many choices and people are watching on YouTube and they're streaming and there's just a gazillion things to choose from, which means the audience is smaller and sometimes the money available to make a program, therefore, has shrunk.
yeah.
So all those constraints make it harder to create something that looks just like the Waltons. It's not going to happen. It's impossible.
Yeah.
So be supportive of the creative efforts of people who are making telling the kinds of stories that you wish you could see more of.
Yeah.
And that definitely includes, the folks who were from the CW who were making the two Waltons kind of reboots. They did a Thanksgiving one and they did a rework of The Homecoming. And they were also pretty responsive to fans because fans gave them critical feedback about, they dropped the Ben character, and in the new one they managed to kind of work back in a character to increase the number of children. So they're doing their best, I think, to be responsive to feedback from fans. So I just want to, as I always say on my Facebook page, be nice. If you put people down, I'm going to delete your comment because my rules on my Facebook page are the same as my rules in my classroom. You're not allowed to put people down.
Sure. Thank you for that question. We're pretty much out of time, Kami, but I'm going to ask another question that's been sent in by the fans because they took the time to send them in. So let me pick out one more. Okay, Steve Adair from PA again would like to ask Kami how you felt about filming the episode The Ordeal.
The Ordeal was an episode where Elizabeth breaks both her legs and ends up in casts and braces. It was a 2-hour special, and one way to learn more about that episode, I know I've spoken about it on my Facebook page. So if we don't get to everybody's questions, then I just encourage people to jump onto Facebook, look for my page, and then just scroll back into the history. Because a lot of these questions, people have asked them previously and I've talked about them on the page. So kind of take a deep dive and you might find some more information. Also, Judy's YouTube channel, I think she asked me questions about The Ordeal when she interviewed me. The ordeal was not an easy show to make. When Elizabeth was in casts, they basically had to make casts on my legs and then cut me out of them in order to film me in them. And I did spend a lot of time just staying in them because it was so hard to get in and out of them that I was just like, I'll just sit here, just give me my book and I'll wait. And then the braces were real old-fashioned 1930s leg braces. So when I wore those for a day, I found all kinds of muscles that I didn't even know I had were sore the next day. So there were some real physical challenges in figuring out like how to work the crutches and how to work the wheelchair and like a lot of it was like a workout. Like I was sore a lot of the time when I went home in the evening. But it was a fun story to do. I got to work with Rachel, who played Amy Godsey, and it was always fun when Rachel was on set because somebody else my age. And I also it was directed by Larry Dobkin, who was one of my very favorite directors. So it was always great to work with Larry. And he used to be an actor. If you look him up, he's in something you've seen. He's also I swear to God, his voice is in the Pirates of the Caribbean because he used to do a lot of voiceover work. So
and
yeah, no, the ordeal was an ordeal, but not terrible. It was just a lot of work.
Oh, Kami, I just want to thank all the fans once again for taking the time to send in their questions. Thank you everybody for that. And as you can see, Kami happily answered them for you. But we're absolutely out of time already. I can't believe it's gone so quickly. But
well, thank you so much for inviting me. I know we have a lot of friends in the UK, and we're always wishing that we could find some way to visit and meet people in person and have these conversations. And maybe one day, somebody will figure out a way to bring us all over so we can have a chance to chat with our UK fans, because you guys are always available, and sometimes you even make the whole trip to the United States to meet us, and we really appreciate the devotion really that folks have shown to the show.
Well, for those fans watching in the UK right now, the good news is that I've been chatting to Mary about this, and I've been working behind the scenes to try and find ways of making this happen. So the wheels are turning in the background. So if you're in the UK, come and leave a comment on the video. Let us know if you would come along, because we want as many people to come and see these guys. If they make the journey over to the UK, we would love to have all you guys come. But we'd love to bring you guys to Scotland and see some of the place. And I know Eric's been here before. He's certainly visited a few distilleries here.
Yeah, I have an English husband, so I've spent lots of time roaming around England. And we've never made it. Scotland is on my bucket list. Like, we just need to go a little bit more north so we can see all the fabulous things y'all have.
Okay, let's make it happen then, Kami. Thank you again for taking the time. Thank you the audience for watching another Waltons interview. We'll see you again tomorrow with another guest from the Waltons.